Okay, so I'm going to go more advanced and we're going to do some advanced Python challenges and learn about Tkinter, which is a graphical user interface. So a lot of Python is just literally lines of code, and we see that code appearing when we run our programs. But actually, what Tkinter allows us to do is actually have buttons, have graphics. So it's a really useful library that we can import with preset functions. So what my first line is doing, that first line of code, it's saying open that library and import all the commands. Okay, so open our preset library, which is our Tkinter. All the preset commands, we're importing them in there. So that is what our first line of code is doing. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is set up a subroutine or a function, so that it saves me, it saves time. Instead of me having to, if I was making a square, or let me think, if I wanted to say a song, Old MacDonald had a farm, and I wanted to say E-I-E-I-O, it's going to be annoying if I want to keep printing that over and over and over and over again. So instead, I can set up a function, and I'm going to call it chorus. The way you set up a function, you put define, def for define. We're starting to define it and say what's in our function. We give it a name, so I'm calling this chorus, and then you'd have an open and closed bracket, just to say, right, we're going to start it off. At the minute there's nothing in it, we're going to start our function. So and then I can put E-I-E-I-O. So if I wanted to have my song, I can put Old MacDonald had a farm, and instead of me putting E-I-E-I-O all the time, I can simply call my chorus, and then I can go for the next verse. And on that farm he had whatever. Again, I can literally just hit chorus and enter, oops, when it pops up, and it'll literally run it for me. It'll call it back. You can tell I can't remember Old MacDonald. And it's going to call it for me. So if I run it, I'm just going to comment out my Tkinter code because it thinks I want a graphical user interface. You can see it there. So Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. So it just does it for us. Okay, so that is how we set up a function, a subroutine. We put define or def, we give it a name, bracket, bracket, open and close brackets, colon, and then we indent our next line. If I wanted to add more, I'd literally just keep indenting it underneath. So all that is a part of that function. Okay, and you can see it just calls it for us. Now the reason I'm telling you that is because we're going to do this for our graphical user interface. So I'm going to set something up called run. So when I call it later on, it's going to do this piece of code for me. And what I want it to do, I want to have a button that is going to be pressed. And I need to label my button. So this is what I'm going to label it as. I want the text to read, when I press the button, I want it to say, you press the button. Okay. So when we run it, when we press it, we want this message to pop up. I want to place this message in set coordinates. Oh, that should be an equals. So on my x-axis, I want it 30 across. On my y, my vertical axis, I want to go up 50. So that's me positioning my message. And then I want to choose my colours. So I want my background button, which is button background, BG for background. My background button, let's make that red. And then the text on my button in the foreground, or FG, we'll make that white. Okay. I also want to have a title. Every time we have a pop-up window, when you name your files, you can see the name. So I'm going to call this TK button. And I'm going to set my window to be a certain size. So it's just literally loading up this geometry preset Tkinter code. So that's the size of my window. I want it to be that big. I'm then going to add the button. So on my button, I want it to say, press me. And then when we press it, I want it to run, go back to that function I've set up. Okay, so it's going to call that function. So I'm having a window and it'll have the title at the top. That's the size of my window. On my window is going to be a button that says press me now. When I press that button, my code is going to jump back up to this function here, this run function, and it should pop up saying you press the button. All that's left to do is say where I want this button to be placed. So that's button.place. And I'm just putting in my X and my Y coordinates. The width of how big I want my button to be. And the height of my button. And I just add it with window main loop. So if I run it, oh, I've got invalid syntax. It's because it should be one word. I don't like that. Let's take it back to just TK. Here you go. So you can see it says the name of my window there, that TK. You can see that at the top. That's my little window. And it's got a button that says press me now. If I press that, it says you press the button and the colour changes to show it's been pressed. So this is what Tkinter does. It creates that graphics. So I've got windows, I've got buttons, I've got colours. So it just makes Python a little bit more exciting and a little bit more interesting. So what I would like you to have a go at doing is having a go at doing this again, but this time your challenge, instead of it's saying you press the button, I want it to say hello, and ideally they can enter their name and it can say hello and whatever they're called. So see if you can create a window that will allow the user to enter their name. So I'll put your challenge here. Oops. Apologies. So ask the user for their name. Let them enter it. When they click the button, say hello and their name, and obviously make it change colour with the background and font colour. Okay, see if you can have a go at doing that. If you want to pause the video, the answers will appear at the end. Before you start the challenge, I'm just going to add a few extra little code tidbits that actually might help you. You can add entry boxes where you can either enter text into, and you can either leave it blank or put a 0. So that creates a blank entry box for people to be able to type in and add their data. You might want an output, and again, this time it has a message instead of an entry, and again you can either leave it blank or set it to 0 for people to be able to have an output. You can colour these just as we have done previously by using either background or foreground, and you pick whatever colour. You can also have something called relief, which you can have it's sunken, which means the box style can be flat or raised, sunken, so you can just literally change it to be flat or change it to say raised for your box type. You can have a drop down box if you want a drop down box. So you just literally say list box if you want a drop down. You can tell your box if you want it to be your text to be centered or right aligned or left aligned. Careful of the American spelling. And I think that is probably everything. Again, if you want to display an answer, you should know that you can output whatever text you want. So there's different ways that you can do it. So when you're ready, pause this video, have a go at the challenge. Don't forget to start it with that important setting that library up, the Tkinter library. If you pause the video now, the answers to your challenge will be at the end. And here's your answer.